Hello and welcome to round 3 grants information session about revitalising private conservation in South Australia. My name's Claire Fuller and I'm going to give you a short presentation about the grants currently open until the 2nd of August for background information for yourselves about eligibility criteria, what items are not eligible for funding, and a few other bits of information that you might find useful. So just going to run through a few slides with information and we'll see how we go. Okay, so the Revitalising Private Conservation in South Australia program is underpinned by 5 non-government organisations, also known as NGOs: Nature Foundation, Trees for Life, Conservation Council, Nature Conservation Society and Livestock SA. And those 5 organisations have come together to revitalise funding and grant programs and support for landholders with heritage agreements in South Australia, and also landholders that are aspiring to have a heritage agreement in South Australia. The small grants are currently open, as I said, until the 2nd of August 2021. The grants are targeted at individual properties and individual projects on properties, and the grants are up to $10,000 per application. There is an online grant form, application form, and that will ask you for supporting material. For example, quotes and also maps for where the work is going to be conducted. So if you're putting in an application and you're asking to do some weed control, then we would expect to see a map of where that work would be conducted. It doesn't have to be a fancy map. It can be as simple as a mud map with general locations for where the work's going to be undertaken. The quotes are also very important to include in your application because they will back up the budget that you've requested and will show us an example of what the actual cost is for the work that you're going to be conducting. Hard copies of the application form can be made available. You can download those from our website. However, if you don't have the capacity to download and print off yourself, you simply just send us an email or give us a call and we can post you a hard copy. That's quite easily done. We do have some outreach staff who are on ground visiting landholders, providing advice, and they can also assist you with completing your applications. There is an assessment process at the end. Once all the applications have come in by the 2nd of August, there will be a panel of people that will review the applications and they will be assessed individually on their merit. Those applications will then be ranked and we will allocate the funding likewise. Projects need to be delivered by the 30th of October 2022. We imagine that we wouldn't be able to inform people of the success of their projects until mid to late September. So we would be thinking that a good 12-month program is suitable for delivery. Eligible activities, so what sort of things are we looking at funding? So landholders that have applied previously that have been unsuccessful are encouraged to apply. The development of good conservation strategies, the management or action planning for your properties, so anything that you're not aware of or you want to find out more about your property and then have some sort of action plan for a program of works over a series of years is considered an eligible activity to apply for. Effective work control of weeds, feral animals or overabundant native species. The management of grazing impacts. So we certainly know that kangaroos, for example, have quite an impact on grazing and grazing pressure in heritage agreement sites. The repair of damaged areas. So for example, cleared or eroded sites that have previously been used as dumps, or sites that have been used for tourism purposes or tourists are accessing without the owner's permission to get to some sort of tourism outlook, location, etc. More eligible activities, internal property fencing to exclude stock or reduce grazing pressure on the heritage agreement site, mapping of native plants or native vegetation communities, native animal surveys, so permits are required for those, any sort of habitat creation, including for threatened or declining species, improve water quality and quantity, including decommissioning of water points. So decommissioning is where you might have a dam that you no longer use and it's taking water out of the catchment and you want to have that dam decommissioned so it's no longer functioning and no longer holding water from the catchment. So decommissioning water points is an option. Revegetation with provenance seed and improving fire management for conservation purposes. So there are plenty of people that come to us about improving fire tracks and clearing those up, and that's an eligible activity. Funding is not available for land that's not within a heritage agreements area or site. Activities that have the potential to have a negative impact on our natural resources. Purchase of assets and equipment, unless appropriate justification can be provided. So that includes the purchase of cameras. So we're looking for equipment that is required to undertake the work that otherwise wouldn't be able to be undertaken if you didn't have that piece of equipment. Boundary fencing. So boundary fencing is not an eligible activity. We have a lot of landholders that have boundary fencing issues, and unfortunately this time we're just not funded to be able to support boundary fencing. Boundary fencing is considered an obligation of the landholder, both landholders either side of the boundary fence, to actually install and pay for that fence 50-50. So under this program, boundary fencing is not an eligible activity. Maintenance of areas outside of a heritage agreement, and landholders who have received grant in either small grant round 1 or grant round 2 are not eligible to apply. So if you've been successful in any of our other grant rounds, you're not eligible to apply for grant round 3. Heritage agreements, this is just a little bit of information for you if you like. There are over 1,600 heritage agreements in South Australia that are protecting more than 1.8 million hectares in perpetuity. So the heritage agreements in South Australia are pretty extensive, and we're certainly here to grow the number of heritage agreements in South Australia and to also support those people that have a heritage agreement. This is Angela and Peter Sharley. They are new heritage agreement owners. They're actually going through the process of applying for a heritage agreement. Their property is at Hindmarsh Valley, and that scrub directly behind them is the parcel of heritage agreement that will be placed over that remnant vegetation there behind them. And we've had quite a few of those new landholders come to us since the starting of the Revitalising program 10 months ago. Just for interest and to try and be transparent about some of the process, round 1 we promoted and had open up until October 2020, and when it saw 201 applications submitted, 70 of those were successful. The in-kind contribution to those grants was $1.2 million. There was an independent panel that assessed the grant round. We actually had $450,000 worth of money to allocate. The Environment Minister has been doing some meets and greets with the successful landholders, and that the projects will be finalised within a 12-month period. All of the grant round 1 successful applicants are also listed on our website just for a process of transparency. So if you're interested, you can have a look there. Grant round 2 was called Linking Landscapes, and these are multi-property applications that came to us. So all up we had 21 applications, and that included 141 properties. Some of those applications had numbers of properties that, excuse me, the light's just gone on, had up to 27 properties within one application. So these are large-scale landscape projects that have been submitted and put into us for consideration. In-kind value was of $4.2 million, and we have $1 million in this pool to allocate. There was over $2.5 million requested from the applications, and the projects have up until the 30th of May 2023 to be finalised. We've given longer time in this grant round because the projects are much more substantial, and we don't want to be giving out money and having people spending money quickly. We know that looking after the environment and doing massive sort of control programs and control works is a multi-season process. So we wanted to ensure that landholders had the opportunity to cover a number of seasons in their works programs. We hope to know the outcome of the successful and unsuccessful applicants, and I've said there on the screen it says the end of June. At this stage it's looking like the middle of July we will have an answer on those recipients from grant round 1. For those applicants who don't know the outcome of grant round 2 at this point in time, and if they are successful they won't be able to apply into this grant round 3. But they are encouraged to start an application for grant round 3. You can have it sitting in drafts, and then once you know the outcome of grant round 2, if you've been successful, then you can just delete or ignore the application, and if you've been unsuccessful, then you can lodge your application. So I would encourage those people that are still keen but still unsure on the outcome of round 2 to maybe proceed with putting together a draft application at least, just starting off with the general information so that you're ready to go as soon as you know the outcome. This is the team, just so you've got some faces to put with the names. So there is 5 of us, and each of us are hosted by those different 5 organisations that were listed at the start of the presentation. So myself, I'm the program manager and I'm hosted by Nature Foundation. Alyssa works part-time and is our grants officer, and she's hosted by the Conservation Council South Australia. Alicia Leswick is hosted by Livestock SA, and she works full-time. She's one of our outreach officers, so she's in the field. Rebecca O'Leary is also an outreach officer, so she's in the field meeting people on site. She's hosted by Trees for Life. And Beck Duffield is also part-time, hosted by Nature Conservation Society South Australia, and she's working on our monitoring and evaluation. So that's our team. There is more information can be found at the website, Nature Foundation's website. So if you just did, that seems like a really long URL, but if you search up Revitalising Private Conservation and find the page on the Nature Foundation's website, you will find all the information there about the grant round, the information about the guidelines document, and any other helpful information you might require. So my contact details are there, so my mobile number and my email account address rather, and then we also have a general Revitalising team phone, which the number is there, which I encourage that to be your first port of call for any questions or wanting to link up or ask, find out more details or be sent the guidelines, etc., the application form. So that number is 0436 431 660. Thanks very much for joining, and I hope that's been a useful presentation for you. Cheers.